Aaron Snyder here with the Born Primitive Outdoor podcast, and this is going to be the Backpack Hunting 101 Part 2 episode. Yesterday, I hit pack fitting, footwear, clothing, gear, pack size, things like that. I think I hit most of the highlights on gear. I'm sure I forgot something in the mix there, but for the most part, covered what I wanted to. If I forget something, once we post part 1, if you have questions, hit it up, and I'll probably do like a part 4 by the time this is all done of what I missed, forgot, or other questions people might have. I didn't cover weapons, and that'll be on a separate portion of this in that first part. So from that first part. So food would probably be the next thing I would want to go over. We recently did a video, Steven and I, we went into a local grocery store for backpacking food on a budget. And my goal was to hit that $12 to $15 a day budget and hit over 3,200 calories a day. And I wanted to be at under 2 pounds. So basically, I wanted to be 100 calories an ounce, which is kind of the staple. That's the benchmark. And, anything above that is great, but also wanted to stay at a moderate budget. So having said that, with food, you kind of dabble into this. Like, when I say that, you got to kind of figure it out on your own. Everybody's caloric burn or basal metabolic rate is different. And so some people burn more calories than others. Some people need flat out more food than others. It takes a lot of food to feed this diesel engine. So for me, I'm 32 to 3,500 calories a day, especially on a difficult hunt, which a backpack hunt generally is. And I'm generally below 2 pounds a day. So I'm normally able to do this for quite a bit under the, 3,200 calories or 3,500 calories under 32 to 35 ounces. Because of that, again, I'm usually at 125, 125 calories per ounce. So you want 100 calories per ounce no matter what. And then you got to kind of figure out how much food you're going to need. If you haven't backpack hunted before, I'd say maybe err to the side of caution a little bit. Now, some people, when they get up in altitude, if they're coming from down by sea level, generally you're going to find, for the most part, people eat less. So you do kind of want to make yourself eat to a certain degree. As far as when I say make yourself eat, you don't want to force feed till you puke. But I mean, you need to consume food. You don't want to go on a diet on a backpack hunt. So have to figure that out, right? And then the macros is another one. Do you need more fat, carbs, protein? What do you need? And so I try to, when I'm back home, like right now, I'm trying to get somewhat shredded up, but gain or maintain muscle mass. And so, I'm at a high protein diet. I'm not totally, carnivore, right? I eat some other stuff too, but I'm really high in protein and fat and moderate carbs. So I'm at 50% protein throughout the course of the day, 30% carbs and 30% fat and 20% carbs right now. When I'm in the field, the carbs go up a little bit. So I'm generally more of a, basically 40-30 kind of a split. And when I say that, I'm 40% protein, 30% carbs, maybe 40% carbs and 20% fat. But usually it's like 30 to 40% carbs, 30 to 40% protein and fat for the rest. And again, roughly, right? It's not an exact science. I don't have it that dialed in, but it's close. The biggest thing too is like with that diet is, when you figure out backpacking food is make sure you're getting food that you want to eat. I've seen people order stuff like just type in like backpack hunting food or whatever, backpacking food. You really want to make sure what's in your pack is what you really enjoy consuming it, and not something you're dreading eating. And so, there's lots of different options out there. Some of the things, in one of the bars I'm going to talk about in my kind of gear, Western hunting kind of new 2025 gear, was like off the farm peanut butter bars and chocolate chip peanut butter and jelly. They're like 430 calories for 3.8 ounces. And they're fairly inexpensive. They're not, compared to a perfect bar. Plus, you don't really have to refrigerate them, which is even better. But, if you're on a budget, the brown rice or whatever, the healthy top ramen with an olive oil tuna packet, ends up being, even though the tuna is a little under that, 100 calories an ounce, the olive oil helps. But overall, you end up over that 100 calories an ounce, and that's a great dinner. And it's cheap. Then you have Peak Refuel. There's a ton of different food, dehydrated food companies out there. The Peak Refuel probably has the best flavors and taste. Overall, I'm not a big Mountain House fan of some of their different options. And Peak Refuel, the owner's an awesome guy. And he, he's a hunter, right? He's a bow hunter. He's a rifle, whatever. He's a hunter, and he's really into the outdoor industry. So Peak Refuel or any other like outdoor brand, that's who you want to stick with. You want to support hunters. But they're expensive, right? So they're like 14 to 18 bucks, for a dinner. So you got to weigh that out. If you got the money, it's easier to just buy those things. I would say though, I do not keep them in the original containers, the cereals, the breakfast cereals, or the dinners. I get the hefty Ziploc bags, and then I put my dehydrated meal in the Ziploc bag, and I put the boiling water in that. I've never had an issue. I'm probably going to get burned for this a little bit, but I do, when I want to burn my trash, I can burn that Ziploc bag. I can't burn the actual dehydrated meal packaging. It doesn't really burn. And so, if I have to burn my trash, that's a good thing. It certainly drops weight, and it definitely drops overall size. So I do put my dinners, if I take backpacking meals like Peaks, I do put those in a Ziploc, and just like the beefy Ziploc bags. So, food-wise, I mean, like you can get a Metrex Big 100 bars. That's like basically an over-engineered Snickers. It's a lot of protein. It's a lot of bad shit in it too. But meals throughout the course of the day, right? Like getting a relatively as healthy as you can get bagel, bacon, peanut butter, and honey, the butthole sandwich. Those are good. You're going to be pumping 8 to 1,200 calories with that, depending upon how much peanut butter. You can get the Justin's peanut butter, but like what I did on the video, I got the Jiffy 4-serving peanut butter packets. I blow air into that thing. I squirt honey in that, mix it up. That'll be on the video. And, that's another, I can't remember how many calories that was, but it's a shitload. So those kind of things, the Cliff or whatever company, energy shots, little cubes, those are good. The peanut butter is good. You can get different bars. Those 3 ingredient bars, I can't remember what the heck those are called. Lara bars are good. Just whatever, makes, what you want to eat. But you do want to have a fairly high concentration of olive oil and fat in all of this to help you poop. And so, that's something to think about. The other thing, the supplementation, people ask that, what do I bring? I bring probiotics in, a fish oil or a krill oil. I bring that in with me. Generally, as far as like when I say supplements, like do you want to take vitamins or whatever, but I do bring a probiotic and some krill oil. I do take those with me when I backpack in. Sometimes I'll bring other stuff, but that's pretty standard for me. And then, you have the caffeine aspect. You have coffee. Obviously there's a ton of different coffee companies out there if that's your thing. The thing with coffee, though, is it does take water. And when I say that, I've gotten to the point now where if I'm able to, I will make a coffee. I'm not a huge coffee guy, but a moderate coffee guy. And so I will make a coffee. Helps get the juices flowing. Generally going to help you poop, which is good. And before you start the day, warms you up a little bit. And so I don't, water is a big problem in the high country. And so if you're on a backpack hunt and water is a little bit sparse, I've gotten to the point now where I'll just take pre-workout with me in pre-divided containers, and I'll hammer down. I just shoot it, right? I just slam the scoop in my mouth, drink a little bit of water, and it saves water. That may not be your cup of tea, but something you can do to get some caffeine in you in the morning. Generally, the caffeine wise, it depends like what your body likes. Does it make you itch? Does it have a ton of niacin? Does it have sucralose? Sucralose isn't good in anything. Is that what it's using to make it taste good? Whatever. You just got to figure that out. But, for caffeine, if you're a caffeine junkie, the pre-workout scoops are a good option, right? And when I say that, if you want 400 milligrams of caffeine a day, 200 in the morning, 200 around, noon to 2, I just take some type of a pill container or whatever, and I put the scoops in there, and I have them marked out. I have little lines so I know I don't take too much. pre-workout and do it that way. So that's another good option. As far as like breakfast, things like that, the peak refuel breakfasts are really good. If you're going to make one at home, generally what I do is take protein powder and put that and mix that in with, whatever granola you like, sliced almonds. I'll throw some craisins in there. You can make one hell of a meal or a breakfast yourself. The other thing you can do is cold oats. So if you want to do oatmeal, but you don't want to boil water in the morning, cold oats isn't a bad idea. So you can get your oatmeal together the night before. I put some protein powder. I pre-mix this. Couple oatmeal packets, some of the healthier ones. Throw some protein powder in there, whatever else. I pour that, fill that up the night before, mix that up really well, and that reconstitutes overnight. Then I wake up in the morning and have cold oats. So that's another viable option if you don't want to, start the stove up in the morning. I'll also do that and then just throw those cold oats in my lid, because if I get up in the morning and it's off to the races, I don't want to have much on my stomach. I'm not that guy, I don't want to be like gagging from having food and, I'm climbing up to the glassing point. So most of the time, I don't eat shit when I wake up, maybe a little bit of a bar or something. But when I get to a place, so if I backpacked in and, I'm going mule deer hunting, I got my little camp and I'm going to my glassing point. While I'm behind the spotter and optics, I'm going to eat my breakfast. And elk hunting's the same way. Sometime in the morning, right, you're probably going to hike a little ways. You might be, if it's in the dark, you might be listening for elk bugling, whatever, wait for things to crank off. And you'll hit that midday lull. Somewhere around 9 or 10, the thermals change, everything goes to shit. Then I'll eat my oats then. I just make sure that Ziploc containers, I'm not leaking stuff all over the place. So a few different ideas there, but just remember 100 calories per ounce at a minimum as a whole. So again, if you're mixing like olive oil, tuna packets, and ramen, as long as your dinner exceeds that 100 calorie per ounce, you're a victor. You're a winner. That's going to work. And again, depending upon your body type and everything else, you'll have to mess with that yourself. But definitely, I would figure for anyone, you're going to be at 2,800 plus calories per day. And at 32 to 35, a lot of times I'm at a caloric deficit, especially on hard days. And then some days I will rob Peter to pay Paul occasionally. When I say rob Peter to pay Paul, if I've had a softer day, I'll save some food if I'm not as hungry for harder days when I need to bump it up. That's not a horrible idea either. Again, you're just going to have to go on how your body feels when you're kind of figuring that stuff out. Trying to think if I missed anything on food. Again, there's going to be a ton of videos on this stuff. This is just kind of a once over, so hopefully that helps out a little bit. So now on to the weapon. I'm more of a bow hunter than a rifle hunter, so I'm going to focus on the bow hunting side of this. I carry a repair kit. It's fairly minimal, but with my repair kit, I want to make sure I've got a couple extra field points in there, a judo tip, serving to reserve anything that I need to serve, the Allen wrenches that are applicable to the primary things, how to adjust my sight, things of that nature. I'm going to have those in my repair kit. I'm going to have some super glue, at least one extra D-loop and an extra release. I could pretty much get anything done. If I'm shooting mechanicals, probably gonna have a couple extra mechanical broadheads in there. The judo tip, that's if I need to fire a confirmation arrow and I don't have to worry about, if it's a shorter distance, because judo tips have more drag, but if I want to fire one at 20, but that's actually more for a grouse, right? So I generally don't anymore have a judo in my quiver all the time. A lot of times I just have it in my repair kit. So I'm not a, 4 broadhead, 1 judo tip guy. I'm kind of a go big or go home. If you're going to be a bear, be a grizzly. I'm going to have all broadheads in and have an extra judo tip or 2 with me. Now, if I'm hitting an area that just has a ton of grouse, rewind, hold up, wait a minute. I'm probably going to change that up, and I'm going to put a judo tip in, at least 1, into the quiver once I'm back there. But out of the gate, I generally don't do that. But I do have them. The Allen wrenches, if you buy the singles with the short little bends, they're really not that heavy, but very important. And again, the serving and everything else, learn how to reserve, back serve, things like that. The super glue, I haven't needed that many times, but I can also use that for other things. But sometimes I may have an abrasion, something may happen on my top or bottom cam where some survey's coming loose. I'll quick back serve it, throw a little bit of glue on there, burn it, whatever. But the super glue does help. So that's kind of the primary. A lot of times too, I'll carry a flat blade in there. Just so I have it. When I say that, that's a razor blade, a flat blade, or some kind of a surgical blade I'll have in my pack in case it's just easier to work on stuff. I got to cut things loose. After that, and I've done a video on like backcountry proofing your bow. Sorry, I had to take a drink. Mark your cams. As far as for your tune, I mark my cams. We'll show that in the video. I definitely mark all those things. I make sure everything's tied in correctly and durably, so I don't durably. Is that a word? Peep sight. If you're using a drop away arrow rest tied up to the cable or the limb, just make sure all that stuff's bulletproof. On there. I'm not a big Loctite guy on some things. Other things I am. I certainly Loctite things that are applicable, on the bow to make sure they don't come loose. It's not out of the question for me to put a big mark with a knife where my primary or my God marking is or whatever else. So, I will do that at times as well. So just make sure all that stuff's ready to go, ready to roll and durable. I don't strap my bow to my pack very often. I'm not a big fan of that. I'm generally a one walking stick guy. If I have two, that little bit different story. I might strap my bow to my pack, but I got the ice axe or a walking stick in one hand, my bow in the other. I don't like strapping a bow to a pack unless I absolutely have to. So as far as like the bow setup that I use, people get pretty wrapped up, the arrow weight, the FOC, everything else. I wouldn't stress over, accuracy is king. For me, I'm generally at 465 to 500 grains, roughly. It's normally around 480. I'm at 280 feet per second, roughly. And that's where I like my bows to be. And I say that sometimes I've been down as low as 270. Sometimes I've been up in the 285, 288 range, but I like right around 280. That's the most tunable for me. That's where I get the best of all worlds for noise. My bow's a little bit quieter, usually around 175 up front. And I'm normally at a 300 spine. Now, sometimes I'm going to be at a 250 spine. A lot of times I'm shooting 78 to 85 pounds. I shoot a little bit higher, whatever poundage. And so right now, Evolution, Hyde is the mechanical I use. I've been using VAP arrows. I've had really good VAP TKOs. I might go to the Easton 5mm this year or the Parallel Pro. I'm not sure. I'm kind of in a position I can just do whatever I want, so I may shoot both. Who knows? But I was really happy with that 5mm and some of the new Easton components. Dale with Evolution, he and I work together quite a bit, so I really like that Hyde. And if I shoot a Parallel Pro, I'm going to have a glue-in Hyde. I really like glue-ins when I'm shooting micros. Quiver-wise, man, I've never, the tight spots have gotten a lot better over the years as far as noise, but man, I'm shooting a Hoyt right now, RX9 Ultra, and I really like the Hoyt quivers. I think it's the ultralight version. It's a one piece that's quick detach, got a couple wing nuts, whatever on there, it comes loose. Generally the bow company that makes your bow is probably going to have the best quiver out there, specifically Hoyt and Matthews. They make really good quivers. But I want to make sure and noise proof the shit out of that thing. So, something to think about as far as that goes. Drop away arrow rests. I'm a big fan of that AAE Prophecy. There's a ton of good arrow rests out on the market. Hamsky makes a great arrow rest. What's that other thing? The Ripcord, or I can't remember it. Kenneth Thrall shoots one. I should know the name of that. Good Lord. Anyway, and Kenneth kills a ton of shit. So, Kenneth's a hell of a hunter, and he's had great luck with that. The Prophecy for me just has good mojo. I've just had insanely good luck with that arrow rest. It's hard for me to pull that thing off my bow. And that Prophecy, you have to cock it up, and I've gotten used to that, but I've just had such good luck. I love that Prophecy. Sight-wise, you want to get comfortable. I would say elk hunting, you want at least 3 pins. 5 is kind of like the happy hole. I said the happy hole. The happy, medium for everything. 7's a bit much. I used to hunt with 7 using my bottom pin as a rover, but at least 3 for elk hunting, 20, 30, 40. Some people do 25, 35, 45. But again, 3 to 5 is good to go on a dial. And then my bottom pin is my rover pin. So, right now I'm shooting that dialed proof, and my 60, so 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, I got 5 pins. My 60 is my rover. And I can reach out and touch something if I need to. Stabilization systems, I'm using that, and I've tried a bunch of, there's a ton of good stabilizers out there. That AAE Mountain series is what I have on now. I've got 3 ounces up front, 7 ounces out the back on my kicker bar, and I do shoot a fairly heavy bow. Release wise, I've hunted with a hinge release. I've hunted with all kinds of stuff. Right now, I would say the best release that I've seen for a while for an all-around good release is that new Evolution Ibex thumb button. I like the Ibex hinge, and I've shot a hinge for a while, but I'm getting to the point, now where, I've shot off and on with everything else, and whatever you're comfortable with, have a backup. That's the biggest thing I guess I'm leading up to. And make sure your primary, anytime you take it off your wrist, you strap that bad boy to your limb. Straight away, right to your limb, so you don't ever walk away without it. That happens. Broadhead wise, whatever floats your boat. But either way, that's kind of my weapon system and my release. Moving on, on the backpack hunting side of things, I'm going to talk about fitness now for a minute. With fitness, you can be not at the pinnacle of fitness and kill a lot of stuff. And I just talked with Ike Eastman at length about this on his podcast on Eastman's. If I'm going to pick someone, it's 20 to 30 pounds overweight, that's mentally tough, but really understands animal behavior. I'm going to pick that guy over someone that doesn't understand animal behavior that can run a 5-minute mile. And that's just flat out, I think anybody that's hunted long enough will tell you the same thing. So fitness is important, but what type of fitness? There's nothing wrong with CrossFit. There's nothing wrong with whatever workout, but bottom line, boots on the ground, put miles on the ground with a pack on your back. Side hilling, you need to get your feet toughened up. Like orthotic wise, I'm not sure if I covered this. I use sheep feet orthotics. And so if I didn't cover that in the footwear thing, I like the top coating, the top cover of the sheep feet as far as shear resistance. I don't get hot spots with that. So make sure you cover that as well when you're looking at footwear. I would definitely go with a sheep feet orthotic, but get your feet, your boots, your hips, your shoulders ready for weight. I've changed my thoughts as I get older. Do not pack crazy heavy weight when you train. I used to do that, and I'm paying for it now. 45 pounds is a good weight to train with. And I mean, get after it with 45 pounds. Don't be afraid occasionally to throw 80, 90, 100 pounds on your back to see what it feels like. But don't do it. You're burning miles in your life. And I'm telling you, I'm almost 50 and my knees are starting to catch up to me. I'm missing some cartilage. I just had a surgery on my meniscus. And I was the asshole telling people, fuck you, what do you know? I'm going to carry 100 pounds. And I used to carry crazy heavy weight. I wish I wouldn't have. 45, 50 pounds is a good weight to train with and get after it. If you want to bump up a little bit every now and then, go ahead, but rub some funk on what you're doing. Do some hill climbs, do some stair climbs, some side hills, do some long base miles, do a little bit of everything. Just get ready. I mean, I still go to the gym, right? I go to the gym once or twice a day, and I do kettlebell swings and push-ups and pull-ups and abs and all kinds of shit. But, and I got a big tire outside of my house that I do beat the shit out of, especially when I'm having a bad day. I flip that thing occasionally, drag it. I do stuff like that, but nothing beats what you're doing, right? You want to practice, you want to draw heavier weight with a bow, draw your bow. If you want to, again, be as proficient as you can be, hit the mountain with a pack on your back and just train that way. So that's important. But with fitness, again, like, hopefully it becomes a lifelong lifestyle thing. And if you want to do CrossFit, I think CrossFit's great. I would stay away from kip ups, but make sure you hit those base miles, side hills, and things like that. And I would say, if you can, rub a little funk on your variety, right? So base miles one day. And when I say base miles, if you can knock out 8 miles, 4 miles, 8 miles, 12 occasionally, do that. Other days, do a little bit more, Like when you're running, whatever you do, telephone, sprint one, pull, walk it, sprint it, do some hill climbs, right? Get your heart rate up, and you're very rarely hunting are you ever going to run. I wouldn't worry about running with a pack on, but I would definitely do a more intensified climb. Get to the top, go slow back down, go up on your climb halfway, side hill over, zigzag back, do a lot of side hilling, so when you're kind of traversing, side hilling up, go straight up for a minute, cut left, cut right, just get some variety in there, fitness wise. I'm kind of a one trick wonder. I mean, I can get away, I can go to the gym and not embarrass myself. I can do a pile of push-ups or whatever else, but I'm definitely not going to win any CrossFit contests. Things of that nature. I definitely need to work on some mobility, things of that nature. But one thing I can do is walk. I can hike. And I can hike with heavy weight. And that's just from me doing it. And I'm not saying my way is the right way or how I did it. And I wish I would have done a lot of things differently. But I can say you definitely need to put some miles on the ground when it comes to, training. And again, get your pack on. Get it ready to go. There's nothing wrong with throwing some plates on your back or in your pack. But, man, I really kind of shy away from that. I think taking a 40-pound sandbag, maybe letting a little bit of weight out of that, duct tape and the shit out of it, put in the bottom, couple blankets, few pillows, put that other weight in the middle of the pack and get it more to the fit and feeling of a loaded pack. So it's totally stuffed. And when I say that, I mean, if you've got a 7,000 cubic inch pack, stuff that thing. Just make sure the middle of that is 30 to 40 pounds. So you hit that 45 to 50. So you get the feeling of what it's like with all that weight. You put a 45-pound plate strapped to your back. You're carrying the weight, but it's not as cumbersome as that big pack. So get used to that as well. One thing I didn't mention, hold on, take another drink here. One thing I did not mention earlier when we were talking about pack fitting is equal distribution of the pack. I don't think I covered that. Make sure that your pack is equally distributed throughout, meaning when you're loading it up, if you've got weight on the right side, if your spotter's on the right, your tripod's on the left, vice versa, to make sure that center of gravity of that pack, back and front and left and right, are even. You want to get all the weight as close to your back as you can, but what you don't want is a lopsided pack. So make sure that, it's distributed correctly when you're loading it up. Fitness-wise, Matt Chan's a guy I work with a lot. I've done some podcasts with Bruno Fallon, I work for him over at Born Primitive. He's in charge of the tactical and hunting side. A lot of experience in the military. There's a ton of mountain physio. He's another guy that can help you out recovering and getting ready for a backpack hunt. The Mountain Tough Fitness guys, I'm not super close with those guys, but they offer an insane workout program. All of that stuff is good. But at the end of the day, if you can't afford any of that stuff, walk. Just get out, do push-ups, do air squats, do lunges, kettlebell swings. Just get out there and do something to get ready. But again, with the pack on is a huge one. We're about 30 minutes into this. So after, you've got your gear figured out, you've got, everything dialed, your food's dialed, load the pack a few times, get comfortable with how you load it, where you want everything at. You can do that in the living room. Now you're ready to go on your hunt, right? And so when you're picking where you want to go on a hunt, your route planning is hugely important. And when I say that, that kind of breaks into the land navigation portion of that. The GPS, Spartan Forge, whatever mapping software you use. But when you figure out your route in, you really want to, when you figure out your route in, I'm not as anal retentive as my partner in crime, Kurt. He was a recce guy, so he's way overboard. But water's going to be a big thing. So you want to kind of figure out when you're going in, when you camp, where the water's at. That's going to be a huge decision maker of where you end up. So if you're hunting elk, right? Elk need water to live. Mule deer can get away with a lot less. Sheep specifically can too. Mountain goats are the same way. Elk need water. So what you don't want to do is camp right where the elk are. And by default, sometimes you're going to do that. You don't want to camp in the middle of the basin. So you want to figure out your hidey hole that you can find, that you're going to want to set your camp up. And when I say hidey hole, there's a few things you're going to want to look at. One, water. You want to be somewhat close to water. You don't want to be so close when you camp that it deafens you. That's a huge mistake I see people make. I don't care, a creek, whatever it is, get away far enough from that thing that it's not distorting your hearing, whether that means because a bear's in your camp or hearing elk, whatever's around you, bugle and stuff like that. So you want to be, 100 to 200 meters away, or yards, whatever, away from the water source. But you want to be close enough to it that you can get it relatively quickly, but you don't want to be a high traffic area for elk. So that's one. The next thing, wind. You want to get, like if you're at tree line, you want to get, if you're camping, into a patch of bristlecombe, sparsely pines, white pine, whatever you want to call them, you want to get a wind block. When I say wind block, if you can be, almost 360 degrees enclosed, that's great. That wind can be horrible, keeps you up all night, blow your tent down. But you also want it to be semi-hidden. And depends on the situation, but do you want it wide out in the open where everybody can see to keep them out of there? That's an option. But you also don't want it so exposed to me, that literally, like, obviously if elk see it, they might, shut her away or whatever. So I try to keep mine where you can see it if you're looking, but it is pretty tucked in wind, snow, whatever, sleet, rain. I'm getting protection from that. The direction of the wind is another big one. If you can kind of figure out where the direction of the wind is, if you don't have a lot of cover, generally, like, the sun comes up, thermals go up. So anyway, when it's cold, thermals go downhill. When it warms up, thermals go up. And then you have the prevailing wind as well. So you have thermals, wind. I don't want my scent blowing, roughly 400 yards is about the distance where I start to worry about something winding me. After that, unless it's a bear, they're probably not going to smell you. So I want to be far enough away, at least 4, but generally farther than that away from where the elk or mule deer may be. I don't want my wind blowing in that direction. And I also don't want to just be getting hammered by wind when I'm in there. So those are different things to think about. The next thing, like when you set up your shelter, you don't want to be in a depression, right? You want to have a little bit of high ground, and that may be very little bit of high ground. And when I say that may just be a rise, whatever else. But if you see a depression that probably was a pond, but now it's flat, if you get a large amount of rain, there's going to be rain there, right? So you want to worry about that. Get up a little bit on a higher point when you set that up. And again, away from the animals. And that 400-yard rule, I'd say, is pretty true to an animal smelling you at 400, meaning if you're on a mule deer stalk, you get 400 yards away and the wind's blowing right at them, you're probably going to be okay. They're not going to run off. You get closer than that, you're starting to push the limit. So that 400-yard range. And again, I try to double that when I set up camp. So I'm going to cover mule deer and elk right now as far as this stuff goes that I'm talking about. When I'm camping for mule deer, you may not be able to camp in the tree line. You may be above it. I've killed mule deer at that 12.5 plus range, certainly 12,000, 11.8, wherever tree line's at. So when I do that, I'm definitely looking for, some type of a saddle or something that's going to try to get me out of the wind and out of sight of everything. As high as I can go, that still keeps me close to water, keeps me away from the sight of everything and the smell, but so I have to climb less to get to my glassing point. Now, when I'm glassing, I'm going to move around. I'm not just going to have one glassing point, but, best case scenario, one glassing point is going to get me close. And, best case scenario, I'm 300 to 400 yards away from my glassing point. Even better than that if it's closer, but 300 to 400 yards, by the time I'm up there, that's not a horrible climb, couple 300. You get to where you're hiking even farther than that, it's almost too far. You may have to do that, but you want to be close enough to that, but far enough away from the animals, from the deer or whatever. As far as elk goes, you may not be glassing for those, but it's the same kind of, I want to be, like when I said double, at least 800 yards from any area that's going to hold elk, and even farther would be better. I can hear them, at 800. So when I'm doing that, right, I'm going to go and project. I'm going to assess, again, prevailing wind and thermals, and I'm going to set my camp up if there's a certain area I can hunt that is applicable to the wind and thermals. So if I go in and I know of an area, or I found an area that's a bedding area, I stay away from the bedding areas, right? So I'm not going to camp anywhere near that. I'm going to want to get to whether it's feed to bed like a whitetail, So where they're going to be at in the morning before they head back to that feeding area that I can get to quick, or excuse me, that bedding area that I can get to quickly. And things change as they get more rutted up, right? But I want to be close enough to where I can hear them screaming in the morning when they've rutted up all night and they're feeding, that at the very least I can get in on them then, or catch them when they're moving back to their bed. And that can be quite some distance. It's actually fairly impressive how far elk can go when it comes to, their rutting area, where they're at night to where they're bedding up. Stay the fuck out of bedding areas. Public land, especially OTC, for guys that say, oh yeah, still hunt the bedding areas. Do not listen to that shit. Don't do it. If you're in a limited draw area that has a ton of elk, it's a little bit different. But man, I would stay away from bedding areas. That's their home. Don't push them out of there. Try to stay away from that unless you have the perfect wind. And that's different, right? You have the perfect wind and you know where they're at and you can sneak in there and potentially call a bull out of its bed. That's a different story. But man, just be very weary of the wind. You can't beat their nose, right? Be super careful with that. So distance-wise, hopefully this is making some sense as far as how far away I am with mule deer and elk. Now, how my day begins when I'm backpack hunting, I get in, I got my tent set up or whatever else. I don't sleep that much. I roll out of the fart sack, kind of lay there and I listen. And in the military, they call it, SILS, stop, look, listen, and smell. I just kind of lay there hoping to hear a bugle, right? I'm just kind of farting around, and then I'm going to probably, you're not supposed to do this. I might fire up the reactor, the stove I've got, heat up the tent a little bit. I'm going to get dressed. And then what direction am I going? If I've pre-planned it accordingly, right? That's different, right? That's what I talked about before. I know where I'm going, and I'm going to, in accordance with the thermals and the wind, hunt that way. So the thermals at night or in the morning are coming down at first, and as the day heats up, they go up. So if I'm going to get up real early, I'm going to know that I'm going to be hunting more up than I am down because of the thermals. Wind, it changes a little things. So if I don't know where I'm going to just figure out to the best of my ability, little deductive reasoning, little redneck ingenuity. Okay, the thermals are coming this way. I looked at my map. I think elk are here, and I'm going to pack up for the day what I need. I mean, not bivvy hunt. I'm not going to have all my shit on my back. I'm going to have my day hunting gear with me, and that's going to include my possibles pouch, game bags, a puffy jacket, rain gear, that kind of stuff. And I'm going to just slowly move through. Now, there's a ton of methodology into elk hunting. And when I say that, you've got Corey Jacobson and that crew, and they know what they're doing. You got like Stealthy Hunter's a hell of a hunter, Dan Picard, the Go Hunt guys, Chris Rowe, Jason Phelps. You got all these guys that have all these different ideas behind it. You're going to have to figure out what works for you best. I can't call like the Phelps guys or the Jake, whatever. I can't bugle as well as they do. And I can call, right? But there's a note that some elk hunters can hit that literally on their bugle, that one bull, how he's responding, they will kill that elk. And I would say, it's, you'll hear guys, Joel Turner's another guy, they'll talk about this. If they're hunting that one bull and you hear somebody say, I have a 70% call-in ratio, 80%, 90%, for that one bull that has that one specific bugle, I would say that's probably fairly true. But not all the bulls, right? Not every bull is able to be called in. And I don't want to, this is not my specialty, right? So when I'm hunting, I am not calling a lot. I'm doing more listening than calling. And that's for me, try to locate elk. I'm looking for sign. Is there fresh tracks? Do I have fresh poop? Which direction is it going? Look at the map. Do I have dark timber over here? Is there north-facing timber? Are they bedding there? Do I have a bench above me? I'm looking for all that stuff. And in accordance with the time of day, I'm going to take a wild, hairy-ass guess and be like, all right, sun just came up. I should be catching them from them running up, coming back to this bedding area. I've got an hour window where the wind or thermals, the thermals are still coming down. I'm going to slowly creep up and occasionally just do some modest calling. And when I say that, I may bugle a little bit. I may do some lost calf call, cow calls, just to get some kind of response until I hear an elk bugle. And so when I say that, I may hear cow calls too, but once I hear that elk bugle, the number one thing by far that I've seen is over calling. And when I say that, I'm not disparaging the guys that call a lot. They have their own system. But you're not them, and until you become them, you're probably going to blow a lot of elk out. And I kind of parallel this to going in a bar. And I'm probably going to get flack for this, but if you go into a bar as a human, right, and this is the same dynamic when the elk start running, you got some burly guys, you got some guys over there that are more metro, that they're hot, but they can't fight for shit. Maybe they can. You got a little bit of everything, right? And you got X amount of chicks, which is the bull to cow ratio. If you're in an area with a very high bull to cow ratio, meaning there's a bunch of pipe hitters in there, you got the metros in there, they got lots of money, they're driving out of whatever, Pickett, fucking Lexus, I don't know. It's going to be harder to dive in there with your game and pull an elk out, right? Meaning you got to have some skills. It's same way of picking up a chick. And more than most likely, if it's a very large bull to cow ratio, meaning 65+% bulls to cows, once you've picked up, air quotation, the cow, or once you as a dude picks up the chick, get the fuck out before you lose her. Get out of the bar, right? You don't want to have to fight some giant Neanderthal. It's no different than elk hunting. You get a high bull to cow ratio, you're looking at one bull with 3 to 4 cows, one bull with 5 cows, not one bull with 30 to 40. Now, there are areas that are like that. And again, there's far more advanced people with calling. But if you get in there and, you know, you're at a high bull to cow ratio area and you get a bull just, you know, screaming, a lot of times when they say that I have found that you get into that sub 100 yard range, you'll hear that old adage, just bugle as nasty and as loud as you can, and it'll strike up the primal response, and it's going to come right in. That is not fucking true all the time, I promise. And maybe I'm just not a good enough caller, but that elk has to be in the right mood for that to happen. And if that elk is, let's say, a 280 to 320 bull, and he knows there's a big dick daddy running around, he might say, fuck you, and grab his 5 cows and get out. And I say that like people listening in, there's going to be people like, oh, yeah, I know that. And there's others that are going to argue. But from my experience, sneak in and cow call, right? Like maybe a little bit of bugling, but like sneak in and cow call. Now, if it's a bull just screaming his head off and you're sneaky, keep the calls in your fucking pocket, right? Don't start calling, right? And when I say that, meaning if you walk into a bar and you're like, hey, and you're acting like crazy, right? People are probably going to stay away from you. But you go in kind of slick dick it. You go in, buy some drinks, right? You're being pretty smooth and whatever. You know, you're kind of under the radar. You're not going to get your ass whooped too quick, right? You're kind of being neutral. You might pull one out that way. That may work, but you're probably going to pull a satellite bull out doing that. You could get the herd bull, but you could sneak in with no calling whatsoever and drop a bomb. With no calling whatsoever. And I would say they're bigger bulls that are killed more that way than calling them in for the most part, especially in those high bull to cow ratio areas. So again, if a chick walks up to you and screams, I want to have sex, you're like, Jesus, she's crazy. That's kind of like blowing that estrus call, right? When you're blowing that estrus call like it's money all of the time, you're going to get that crazy ex-girlfriend syndrome. You don't want that. So you got to be effective and precise with your calling. So I'm kind of rambling on here, but just things to think about when you're calling. And it's hard not to call. You hear that majestic bugle. Oh, you're excited. And then you just start firing off bugles. A lot of times they're going to keep bugling at you, staying 150 to 200 yards away, giving you what I like to call false hope. But if you hear that one bugle and you sneak in like a ninja, that's a totally different story. Now, when you get later in the season, you're going to have, you know, turkeys are the same way. You're going to get bulls that are just roaming around, screaming their head off, looking for a cow, right? They're not bad bulls. They're not the herd bull, but they're satellite bulls that just couldn't beat the big dog's ass, right? Those are going to be very killable by cow calling, right? They're just looking for a cow. Right? They're running around screaming, hopefully finding, you know, a hot chick. And so there's a lot of dynamics to this, but that's what my day looks like, right? And that's what'll happen when I'm going in an area somewhat blind is I'm just going to try to, again, look at the map where they could be feeding, where they're probably bedding, assess that and kind of hunt my way through there. Now, the script flips in there at some point where I'm going to be technically above them, hopefully, haven't winded it out, and the wind all of a sudden is going to start blowing up. It'll be swirling for a while. Once that starts, I hide. I get into an area where there's no elk. Hopefully I'll hear some bedded bugles throughout the course of the day. But again, I try to dial in my approach that way where, again, I'm not winding it out. I don't want to ever have them wind me and blow out of the country. So that's kind of what the day looks like for elk. And then I'm out all day. So in the evening, I'm trying to be a little ninja. The wind's getting a little more consistent, right? And I'm going to be sneaking into areas where elk are bedded in hopes to hear a bedded bugle. And I may be on like a ridge line where I've got spur draw, where I got some timber in there where there's going to be, and there's some, when I say timber, there's going to be elk bedded. I may just sneak through like a ninja waiting to hear a bull bugle. I'm going to dial in my evening according to that. So again, when I say evening, the wind and thermals according to killing that bull. If I think I can kill him and get him out of his bed while the thermals are coming up and I'm above him, I'm going to do that 100%. And what I may have to do is start calling, and he'll hear me call if I'm solo. I'm going to take a drink here. Not of alcohol. I've been to be a good boy with that. And I'll call, hopefully get him coming and be on the other side of that ridge. And I'm going to shift accordingly with the way the wind's blowing in hopes to him to loop around and get a shot. If you're with a buddy, it's different, But if the wind's blowing up, I may be down lower, right? Call, he hears me and he's going to loop up above me and shift on the other side of that ridge line so I can move. He's not going to see me. And I may even, play it to where I can shoot that bull as he comes and I can see his horns first, go to full draw and crack him. And again, that's just setting up. The other thing too is don't call when you're by one tree. Like a bull comes out and he doesn't see a cow, he's not going to, anyway, this isn't an elk hunting. This is backpacking 101, not elk hunting. So you get the idea. Mule deer, totally different. I go to a glassing point. I glass till my eyes fall out. Find mule deer. They're going to bed twice almost every time, sometimes more. They're going to bed down once. Do not go on them. Do not go off after them after they bed down. You got to wait till they hit their second bed. They'll get up. They may go 15 yards. They may go 150 yards, and they're going to re-bed. That's the bed you want to kill them in. Same but different. Same, right? I'm looking at that. How can I get there, right? Which approach am I going to make? And then I'm going to go into my back azimuth system, and that'll be a different podcast altogether. But I'm going to, plan my route around that deer. Now, if there's multiple deer and they're spread out far enough, I may plan that loop in case I screw the first one up to hit another one. And that may be a giant, horrific, god-awful loop that I make throughout that course of the day if I'm wearing the cone of shame and blow the stock out. But again, I wait for their second bed. I'm at the glassing point. If I haven't seen deer there, I may move 100 yards. I may move 10 yards. I may move to another glassing point, but I'm just waiting. And if I find a deer and it's not first thing in the morning and it's at like 1 o'clock, that deer's not moving. He may stand up around 2, scratch his nuts, take a couple munches of grass, lay back down, but that deer is staying once he's planted. So that's, with mule deer, it's a little bit simpler, right? That's the way that I do it. The glassing stuff, and I didn't go into optics in that first part. I kind of left that out. So that's something I guess I'll bring up now. Optics. Elk hunting, 8 powers or 10, you're good to go. You don't need to go too crazy elk hunting with binoculars. Range finding binoculars, maybe. I generally, elk hunting or bow hunting, I'm going to use a rangefinder like the SIG 5K and then a set of binoculars, 8 or 10 powers. Now I don't generally ever carry a spotting scope elk hunting, unless it's a very specific situation. Mule deer hunting, I'm generally carrying a 65, 85, or a 95 spotter. But overall, I'm going to carry probably an 85 spotter and a set of 10s or 12s binoculars. The thing is with like 15s, and some guys will hunt with 15s. Omni Warner is a lethal mule deer hunter, and he carries 15s a lot. But for me, I'm going to have 10s or 12s on a tripod, and then I'm going to have my binocular or my spotter. And for me, I don't have as good a vision as a lot of guys, so I'm on that spotter a lot more than binoculars. But generally, when I set up the glass, I grab my 10s or 12s, and I freehand the low-hanging fruit, where deer should be. I don't find deer there. Binoculars go on a tripod, and I start to grid out. Once I've done that and I've gridded out now, and I'm looking, bigger picture stuff now, binoculars come off, I grid, but I'm looking for a lot smaller things. It's like macro to micro, right? Like I'm going from now looking for a horn, a hoof, an ear, something, I'm looking in the shade, right? When I break that down. And then tripod wise, Tricer makes a great tripod. Outdoorsman makes a great tripod. Team Easties just came out with a tripod that's good. But I'm using a pan head. I don't usually use a ball head, and I don't really like the trigger heads for backpack hunting with a spotter and a set of binoculars. I'm using some kind of a pan head. And again, that gridding out is huge. But if you need an all-around binocular, I'd get a 10. And then if you need a little more juice, a 12 won't hurt. If you're going to carry 15s, that's just going to harm you on the stock. That's the biggest thing. But if you have amazing eyesight, might not be as big of a deal. And again, 65, 85, 95, whatever your legs can handle. I like that 85 for mule deer a little more, but the 65, if I'm trying to save weight, that's what I carry. Sheep and mountain goat hunting is a 65. So, something to think about as far as that goes. And then make sure you bring a tripod. Even if you only have binoculars, bring a tripod. That tripod, it is amazing how much more you can spot when you're on a tripod. So that's kind of how that goes. And if I'm elk hunting and doing the same kind of a thing, I'm looking in timber trying to find elk, glassing. I'm doing the same type of stuff. I'm just glassing for elk. I'm not going to be glassing to go stalk on them. I'm just trying to find them where they're probably going to be going to bed if I'm looking like midday, picking through trees and stuff like that. So, okay, that's part 2. I'm at 50 minutes. I did forget optics on the first go round, so I kind of covered that. So with part 2, obviously I hit food stuff. I hit some, fitness or whatever, and then kind of how my day looks when I'm elk hunting or whatever. Part 3, I'm going to dive into more of the tips and tactics on hunting different things, some gear hacks, some things to think about, like with water and everything else, and anything else I can think of. So I appreciate everybody tuning in. Hopefully this is helping you out. As these get posted, make sure, and whatever I'm leaving out or something you want me to add, definitely leave comments for that. But hopefully these are giving you a little bit of insight of what my day looks like, gear and tactics and everything else with elk hunt and mule deer and everything else. So thanks again for tuning in. This is Aaron with Born Primitive Outdoor, and we thank you.